All right, everybody, we are back, Working Dog Radio, broadcasting the bite from Ohio. I am Eric Stanbro. With me always from Tulsa is Ted Summers. Ted, what's going on?
Man, not a lot. I'm getting ready to deliver some dogs and start a handler school in about 2 weeks. So I got 2 more handler schools this year. The last one is going to be super small. It's only going to be like 3 dogs. This one's going to be like 10. So it's going to have some retreads, some new dogs, some new handlers with experienced dogs, some experienced handlers with new dogs. So I've got the whole gamut. Right? Dog I didn't train. That's fun. So that's interesting. The 501 donated a handler school to a department that had a dog that was done. I think they have 6 people on the department, including the chief. So they obviously can't, well, not they obviously, but they couldn't afford to pay for our handler schools in Oklahoma. I think last couple of episodes we talked a lot, or especially the last one, we talked a lot about state requirements changing. Eric went through the OPATA changes, which sounded actually pretty on par with a lot of stuff. And then in between then, Eric had a conversation with Ron Cloward, and I had a conversation with Ron Cloward from Sacramento. And I guess California is moving to 16 hours. Or they're having a meeting. By the time this publishes, there'll be some changes, I think, is what it sounds like. I don't want to speak preemptively, but and during that conversation, I talked to Ron, and he's like, "Yeah, I'd love to come on the show." So at some point, we're gonna have Ron Cloward on too. So he's retired now, but I think he was at Sacramento PD back before California was a state. So long time ago. Ron was there during the gold rush. I
was at that Colorado KINETIC conference with him. And he was a nice guy, real nice guy. We talked a little bit. He's asked me to come out to Reno and teach my e-collar class at this big California thing they got going on. And every year, it's coming up on the 20th. I go to Aruba that same week every year.
Yeah.
So I don't know that that's ever going to link up and work out.
Yeah. I told him next year if he wants one of us to come, like, give us some more time. So give us more than a couple of weeks and we can, because it's right in the middle of my handler school, and I'm like, bro, I can't because I've got all these handlers here. So what have you been up to?
Well, right now this feels like 2019 2020 because I'm in my bedroom recording, and I picked a bad direction, so I have this backlight from my window here.
If you're watching anyway.
Yeah, we'll go to YouTube and watch it. So I got to move my head to kind of block the light, because if I turn the other way, you're looking at my bed and it's kind of unmade, and all my stuff, like the screen that we have, the Working Dog Radio screen, is up at the fun house, and it's Sunday and I didn't feel like driving half an hour up there to do this. So here we are. I got, like I said, I got Aruba coming up, just doing all the normal stuff. Working with a couple private clients lately. There's a lady who comes to me. She's got a Dutch Shepherd, and she put the dog on drug odor, and he does some bite work. I'm probably going to put tracking on him, and she's probably never going to do anything with him. She just wants to do stuff with the dog. So, and he's a dude. He's 2 years old, and I did bite work with him for the first time the other day. Chris Morrell started his bite work. So Chris did all his foundation, but they live far apart. So he started going with Travis, my buddy Travis, and sent him down to me. Nice dog. He could actually be a police dog. I'm just trying to talk her out of him. Like, hey, I can cut him a job. She's like, no thanks.
You're like, you want to sell him?
Yeah,
we did a private detection seminar for what I would consider a competitor this week. They bring in a deal where they're kind of like a Ridgeside type operation. They're based here. They had their like train the trainers deal, and they had us come in to do a detection thing. And a couple of their trainers had some like little lab puppies. I'm like, hey, you want to sell that dog? They kind of looked at me. They're like, are you serious? I'm like, yeah, 100%. I'll buy him. I'm like, he can ruin people's day. He'll find dope like 1,000%. So
that's the big culture difference between us and Europe. They would have sold him. That girl would sell me that dog if they were in Europe.
100%. That is a culture thing.
Move on, go start another one. So anyways, I got a couple of those things going on. I got I had a seminar planned for this month. It got canceled. But next month in October, I'm gone I have a seminar every single week.
That's right. Yeah.
Different places around the country. But, so I'm excited, but it's just a lot of travel, but it's going to be good. I'm in Wisconsin I did a seminar in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin. I had a good time, man. Nice place, nice people.
I saw the pictures from up there. There's a giant cow on a flatbed. I was like, this is the most Wisconsin thing I've ever
it's
seen.
Huge. The funny thing is, it just reminded me of what you said. It reminded me a lot of Oklahoma because there were several guys there that were in 5 and 6 man departments.
Yeah.
Like real small, departments where the lieutenant has a dog, that type of deal. So, but, they got work to do. So we're able to get everybody cleaned up and cleared up. And a couple of people were brand new to e-collar with that dog. So got them all up and running. So it was good. It was good. What do we got going on today? This episode is brought to you by KINETIC Dog Food, KINETICDogFood.com. Ted and I love it, man. It's such a really, really good high performance dog food, but also their 24K formula. We use it for training. It is amazing. A nice big piece. No chicken in that particular formula. So if you get a new dog in from Europe, you don't know if he's allergic or not, don't worry about it. Check it out. KINETICDogFood.com.
Our friends out in North Carolina at Highland Canine Training run great green and finished dog programs, as well as an online and in-person police supervisor course. Hit them up at HighlandCanineTraining.com. That's letter K number 9, HighlandCanine.com. 30% off the discount code WDR30.
This episode also brought to you by Horizon Structures, horizonstructures.com. They will custom build you a kennel, drop it off, hook it up to your water and electric, and have that thing running with dogs in it the same day. They can custom build one. They got some already pre-built. Check them out on their website, horizonstructures.com. Anything you need from mild to wild, they're there.
One of the longtime supporters of the show has been Ray Allen Canine in Colorado Springs, Colorado. They've been around forever. RayAllen.com, where you can buy literally everything but the handler, the dog, and the patrol vehicle. Everything else you can get from them. Hit them up, WDR10RAY for 10% off your order. That's WDR, the numbers 10RAY.
One of our longest sponsors is DOGTRA, DOGTRA Official, DOGTRA.com. We love DOGTRA. Their products are so good. Their e-collars, their ball poppers. Ted uses all kinds of different things at his place, from pet dog e-collars to working dog e-collars. He loves the hands-free 1900S. They've come out with some new models lately and an amazing new bark collar called the Smart Bark Collar. Check them out. Dogtra.com, WDR10 for 10% off a single item over $200. Dogtra.com.
Somebody that's been with us since the beginning is Arnaud out in Vegas at ALM Canine Equipment. If you follow me on social media, you see me wearing my ALM suits all the time. It's all I wear. I've got several of them. Eric's got several of them. We love Arnaud. We love ALM, custom made in Vegas. WDR or WD Radio for 10% off. That's WD Radio for 10% off. ALM Canine Equipment. That's letter K number 9. ALMCanineEquipment.com. Well, I originally got kind of connected to this guest via social media and Instagram. We tend to focus on, and I mean Ted Dowse and Michael KINETIC are kind of like the two guys we've had on the show, and they've been on other, they've been on Police Canine Radio. They've been on Howard Show. They've been on, I assume they've been on Cameron's show at some point. I'm pretty sure. Right. So it feels like, and then we've also had on, Gene Ramirez, which was a great show from Hits. I don't know, whatever Orlando was when we had him on, which was an awesome, Gene's awesome. That was a great episode. So I feel like we constantly have guys on that are within the industry that focus on our cases a lot. I was having a conversation with an attorney and a DA, an attorney and another DA this week or a couple weeks ago. And when they read these cases that we talk about a lot, that are related to dog stuff, they see, I don't know that I think the context is lost on those guys a lot because they're not trainers and they're not handlers. So there's some textual things that happen, I think, in those cases that we say, okay, well, this happened here. And then we have another case from another circuit where this happened here and this happened here. So canine guys in general are able to kind of, I think, guys like KINETIC and Ted Dowse and the guys that are the normal, and Gene Ramirez, the guys that we talk about a lot that are that make the circuits in these shows that give us awesome information, kind of paint the 30,000 foot view picture. And I kind of wanted to have this guest on for a couple of reasons. One is to kind of zoom out past that even further, because we still have departments in this country that, I still have guys routinely ask, and I mean, I'm talking to supervisors and DAs that are like, do we get people out of cars on traffic stops? Are we allowed to do that? I'm like, are you, what? Like, this is still like a thing. It's we're in the last quarter of 2025. Like, we have a remote control car on Mars that has its own remote control helicopter, and it's still like a thing.
Yeah, I'm like, how MIMS?
And we can't remember Mims or Wilson. So I'm just like, or Maryland. I'm like, what the hell? Those aren't even canine cases. So, I tell people all the time that we live in a bubble. The canine guys live in a bubble, especially if you're doing interdiction. Speaking of which, I've been talking to Nick Jackson, and he's going to come on at some point where we can line up. But as another one of those guys that they just live in this bubble, and everything becomes so second nature to them that explaining it is kind of like we're explaining to people like how we walk. I'm like, I don't understand why this is such a like, why you can't grasp this. Like, what the hell is your problem? So this guest that we have on, his Instagram account is actually what caught my attention, which we'll go over it here in a little bit. But this guy has a very succinct way of explaining some pretty complex cases down to like knuckle dragger or leash handler, or knuckle dragger, or in that case, like if you got shiny shoes and stripes, admins, in like very, very concise way of doing it. You're like, okay, so here's like the cliff notes. Typically when I make cliff notes for my guys, it's like little one shot paragraph type deal. Like, this is what happened. This is what it was. Right. And it's just words. This guy has done a great job with like, however he's posting this stuff. So with today is Don Saputa from out on the West Coast. Don, I'll let you do your intro, and you can kind of tell everybody like how we got to this conversation and where you started in law enforcement and all that kind of stuff.
For sure. My name is Don Saputa. I'm the owner of Forecast Securities Group. I started my law enforcement career in 2009, attending the California Highway Patrol Academy. I spent 13 years at that department, and 9 of the years of that time I spent on a major crimes task force that was designated to basically go after gang members, narcotics traffickers, and violent criminals. So it was just designated for the bad guy, like the baddest of the bad guys, and then major level narcotics trafficking. On top of that, I've worked patrol, and currently I work at a municipal police department out here on the West Coast.
So in your time, and I just kind of want to be clear, like, you've never run a dog, but you've had access to a lot of them. I know your current department, they actually have really nice dogs, because I know where they come from.
Yeah.
But they didn't come from me, but I know who trained them, and they do a really good job. So, and obviously CHP has a very storied program, a very successful long program. But give us a little bit of background, because every time I have somebody here that's like not canine, they're like, okay, well, how is this going to work out? So right. You being with all of the spooky boys, there was a lot of integration with dogs. And kind of what I want to kind of go down this road a little bit is what you kind of expected, how you guys kind of use the dogs in that task force venue, and how the planning portion went. And really what I want to have the conversation here is like, if you're a handler listening to this and something resonates, I want you to be able to send this to, I guess, somebody important that makes decisions. It's like not necessarily like way up the chain, but enough that's like, hey, we should and could be doing X, Y, and Z. And here's like a perspective from somebody that was kind of like down the line a little bit. So let's kind of start a little bit with that. All right, this episode is brought to you in part by KINETIC Dog Food, KINETICdogfood.com. We've been using KINETIC for quite a while at the kennel here at Torchlight. We feed the 26 and the 28K formula in feeding for the dogs while we're there, but I also use the 24K for all of my imprinting for obedience and imprinting for tracking. If you follow me, you've seen me do the tracking stuff where I do the Dick Stahl method, who we've also had on the show. But it's great because it's large and it doesn't get greasy and gross in the pouch. I've seen a lot of dudes with drop pouches that look like they're carrying dirty socks around, and it's disgusting. This doesn't do that. It's not greasy. Also, it's not a chicken-based formula. So if you get dogs in from Europe, you're not sure if the stomach is going to handle it. And it's a fairly low calorie version too. So you can do 1,000,000 reps and not have to worry about dog getting fat. KINETICdogfood.com. Also, we've had the guys on the show before and they talk about it, but they do a lot to make sure that the protein bases are nice and pure, and that the stuff that they're adding to it actually adds additive to it, and they're not filling it with pocket lint and sawdust like a lot of other foods. So hit them up, KINETICdogfood.com.
Yeah, so for sure, I've never handled a dog. I'm not going to claim to be a dog handler. However, I have spent quite a bit of time with dogs in close proximity, both searching houses and also deploying from unmarked vehicles with dogs. When I was working for the Highway Patrol, I was also on one of their entry teams. So I would plan a lot of operations where we would deploy dogs as a containment or utilize a dog as part of a takedown or something, mobile takedown or a PED takedown. So I have a little bit of experience interacting with them and integrating them into mission planning. As far as expectations go, I think what most cops want, I mean, even just speaking as a regular patrol cop, I think what everybody expects is that when we get to the point where we're going to send a dog to go do its thing, we want it to be effective, right? I think that's what I'm always looking for is I want to have some trust in that dog that when it goes forth, if it's got the authority to bite and the guy meets all the thresholds to bite, I want that dog to go and bite the guy, because that distraction and that use of force is what provides the safety for me to do what I need to do, right? Which is effect arrest. Without the dog biting, right, that puts us in a worse position in a way, because now the dog is loose, it's running around. And now if I'm, a team leader or somebody who's having to make some decisions, now I have to deal with the dog who could potentially bite officers as well. And I have to deal with what to do now, because this person isn't being distracted or subdued the way that they're supposed to be. So from my perspective, I think some of the worst things that can happen is when we have a dog that is ineffective and we feign to or we lie to ourselves and say that the dog is effective and we're continuing to deploy it on the street. And then it does stuff that's unpredictable or erratic. And now we have to overcome that obstacle as well as the original problem we have. I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges for me.
Yeah, I find one of the biggest problems when we're trying to integrate dogs in with like high-speed teams is they don't get to do it enough, right, at training. They're not there all the time. And operator or whatever you would call him, just a detective cop, whatever, he gets bit once. Like on the haunches, on the back end, his ass or his leg or something like that, he then is going to kind of not be all that trusting, and it can affect like his concentration, because it's hard as a human being when that dog is coming past you and you've already been bit to not look at him and take your eyes off of where you're supposed to be watching. So I do sometimes find that teams want to get a dog in with them. They just don't do the work, like my old department. I was on SWAT for 14 and a half years. And at one point, 4 of us in the canine unit were on SWAT. We never used the dogs, never brought them. They would have us leave them in the cars back at the office, or maybe follow and get out of our car a couple times on perimeters, but we never, ever used them. The Marshals Task Force uses them now all the time, but and I always asked, and they said, because we just don't want to spend the time. We don't want to take the time to try to train and integrate them. So when the time comes, and in Ohio, we have basements, and I remember us just running down steps into basements. I'm like, why aren't we using the dog for this? I don't get it. But, yeah, so you guys got to be real careful with that when they're trying to integrate into those high-speed teams, and you train maybe once a month with the crew or twice a month. It's, to me, that's a no-go.
Yeah. And to be honest, most teams aren't even training anywhere near that much. I mean, maybe once every 6 months, right, with the dog.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
That's bad.
Yeah, and so they bring up an interesting kind of thing, because you said like you led this off as trustworthy. Eric and I had a guest on here that's like Eric, and I know him really well. His name's Mike Lilly. We started out in Florida as a canine handler, and now he's living. Where's he live now, Eric? Tennessee or something. But he's really good tracking trainer, really good trainer in general. But he says all the time, and it's something that's echoed in canine. Like if you're in canine, like guys are like, "Oh, what's the best piece of advice?" And old school trainers are like, "Oh, trust your dog," which is something I think we just kind of have a knee-jerk reaction. We all just say, and to canine handlers, that means a lot, and canine trainers, that means a lot different than it does to non-canine guys. So for us, for the canine side, for the handlers and for trainers, I tell my handlers, I'm like, you can trust your dog when he's shown you that he's trustworthy. and how do we build trust with this, whether this is in detection work or this is in tracking, whether it's in apprehensions or whatever else. I've done an HRD with some guys from, I'm not going to mention the department, but they're from somewhere in Washington State. And when they integrate with their team, those dogs aren't allowed to integrate unless they've already got, I think, 2 or 3 actual apprehensions on the street. So for a person, Don, like in your position where you were doing some of the planning and some of kind of like the forethought and understanding what the capabilities of the dog were, like how do you as a non-canine guy build trust in the team and the handler?
Yeah, so I think it all starts with just typical mission planning, right? I mean, if I think I'm gonna need a dog and I'm gonna put that dog somewhere, whether it's, you know, in the stack or whether it's going to be on a containment position or whether I'm going to put that dog in a van with a bunch of operators and we're going to jump out of a van with that dog. The first step, I would probably talk to the handler and see what the handler's opinion of his dog is. And, you know, if you have a good handler, most of them are going to be like, hey, you know, like he's a good dog, but he's a little skittish in a van, or he's a little nippy in a stack. You know, he's nipped a few people before. If they're being honest with me, then, you know, that may not be the dog for that position. And I may try to get an alternate dog that is a little bit more reliable when it comes to that sense. But if they're like, yeah, the dog's all good, he's solid, and the handler's pretty confident, and it's, you know, hopefully it's a dog I've worked with before and I'm pretty confident, then, you know, I don't really have a problem putting that dog there. It's just about kind of being honest. I think it's about being honest with the capabilities of the dog. I mean, I know a lot of handlers. A lot of them are my friends, right? Like some of the dogs have been puppies and grown up and been a part of my life, right? But we still, just like a regular cop, you need to be honest about your capabilities. I think it's important for handlers to be honest about if their dog is actually really good or if their dog's just mediocre. You know what I mean? Because that's important.
Ted, did you see there was just a body cam that came out? I saw it on Reels a couple times where it was a SWAT kind of call out. And the guys there with the dog and
I knew you were going to.
We want to put your dog in. The handler's like, I don't know that he'll do it because I think the dog was pretty new, hadn't seen it, you know, a lot, and the handler was honest with them, and they go, oh, cool, thank you. We were not going to use him then, but you know, we as handlers, we always want. We want that. We want to get out there and do it. And if your dog, you know, like if you work for where I worked for, we're very busy and we get a lot of street bites. Doesn't necessarily mean that that's the dog I should be sending in with a group of operators, because some of those dogs are going to bite whatever they want. Probably one of my favorite companies to deal with in this industry is Ray Allen Canine. What I really love about Ray Allen Canine is I need one website. I don't got to bounce around to a bunch of different places. I go to rayallen.com and everything I need. Because remember, guys, I have a pet dog training business, same with Ted, and we do police dogs. I'm a pet dog owner. Anything I need dog related. It's not just working dogs stuff. It's dog stuff. Anything I need, Ray Allen has. Rayallen.com has everything you need, from leashes, harnesses, bowls, anything you could possibly do. And here's the cool thing. They're always innovating some really cool stuff. If you follow them on their social media, you'll see Matt on there demoing a bunch of cool stuff they have. They're out in Colorado, got an amazing facility out there. One stop shop, nowhere else to go and look. Rayallen.com. Use the discount code WDR10 RAY for 10% off. WDR10 RAY for 10% off at rayallen.com.
So Don, one of my guys is SWAT, and he's connected to some U.S. Marshals teams and some other federal teams, because we have some extra layer of law enforcement in Oklahoma because we have the Indian thing going on. So I have a couple of guys that are kind of part of all of that, and they don't always work together all the time. But one of the things that they'll do is, like, when they show up to do something like this, they're like, hey, this is the last time I deployed. These are the last 3 times I deployed, and this is what happened. X, Y, and Z, X, Y, and Z. This is how far apart they were. This is what we've done in the last couple of months in training, X, Y, and Z, X, Y, and Z, because they had some issues where they were throwing some tri-chambers into a house, and they were super concerned. They're like, can the dog do this? And my handler's like, he did this 28 days ago, in training. And then the last time he did an actual deployment on this was into an attic. And so my handler like ran down, and these are guys that he had met once or twice. He knew some of the other guys that were involved in this. And at that point, the senior decision makers were like, okay, cool. We're completely okay with that. And because what they didn't want to do was gas this house and it catch on fire, and there's all kinds of other shit going on. And they're like, I don't want, and exactly what you're talking about. You're like, we don't want this serial killer just loose in the house and it's attack one of us while we get gas masks on and like all this other shit. We don't want to deal with that. So yeah, like being honest about it. And for handlers listening to this, that honesty comes from training and from deployments. What in our experience, my handlers, when they kind of go up to issues like this, they can say, these are our last 3 types of deployments or whatever like this. Or we haven't done a deployment this way, but I've done this in training or very similar. And this is what happened. And that I think is very valuable to some of those guys. And then I think a lot of times those guys in your position, Don, to say, okay, well, are you confident that this is going to work? Right. Yes or no? Yeah. And
do you have any stories from CHP you could share?
What I was going to ask.
Everything went perfect. The hit with the dog, like the dog did exactly what you expected.
So CHP to date still does not integrate dogs into entries. They're pretty opposed to that. However, I have done entries where dogs have been reliable and the dog is a confident dog and, you know, it's good on an e-collar or a long line, and the handler is confident in the dog's alert. And, you know, the way that we would typically use them, right, is, you know, we're looking for a bad guy or whatever, and we don't want to fully commit, right, to being into that place. So maybe we'll take a foothold and send that dog out on, you know, either on an e-collar or like a long line, and the dog will go. And I've had success where the dog will go and indicate a bedroom or something, right, and we'll bring the dog back to the stack, and the dog will go into a down and be quiet and sit there and wait for instruction, and we can call a guy out and do all that stuff. I know there's been times too where, you know, the dogs will bark and then go quiet, and then a guy will open a door and get bit, right? So that's the kind of stuff I like with dogs, because, you know, as much as we care about dogs, I would much rather send a dog into a shooting range than another cop, right? So if the dog can go there and do the work, I think it's a super reliable thing. I've also had some where, you know, we've had guys that I knew were going to jump and run, and the dog can't be in the stack, but I'll put the dog in like where I think his best exit's going to be. And I had a guy the guy was wanted on a shooting. It was like a freeway shooting. We had surrounded the apartment. We had a drone up. We had all the stuff, right? We had a dog on the ground floor because I thought, well, he's on a second floor balcony. Like, his quickest way out is to go over the balcony onto the ground, which is what he did. And then he ran right into the dog. So the dog couldn't be integrated with the team because it wasn't that kind of dog, but it was a dog where we could put a handler and a cover officer on the ground floor and still utilize that dog to be effective.
Yeah, it always surprises me when, you know, the SWAT or a task force rolls up on a house, they surround, and the guy runs out the back like, oh, I didn't know you would think of that. The back,
yeah.
Like just as dumb as like in Ohio with basements is they'll go and hide in the basement. You can't get out. You have locked yourself in. They'll go hide they always hide behind the hot water.
Behind the hot washer, by the washing machine of the hot water. You know?
They'll go in the dryer.
Yeah. Oh,
we get some of that. We bit a few people in dryer. So suspects' escape patterns are pretty interesting in what they do. And they'll run out the back door thinking that they're just going to maybe bum rush past everybody. Although it's happened, you've seen it happen. So what's one where you brought the dog in to hit and it was a disaster?
Trying to think. Yeah. So I think I've had a few. It wasn't a pre-planned hit. It was something that was kind of spur of the moment. If I recall, it was a few years ago. I think it started as like a DV type thing, and the dude was supposed to be in there, had a firearm, I think he was a former parolee or something like that. And so we went in there, and this dog was a good dog, but a little unpredictable in a stack. And I remember we get in the house and we're searching for the guy because he was supposed to be inside. And I'm in this hallway and I'm in the front of this stack with a rifle. So I'm trying to focus on like what's happening. And then I'm feeling like intense pressure on my shoes. And this dog is just giving me some, like it's not giving me a full bite, but he's just giving me a little bit of like love taps on my shoes, and I'm like, hey, like shooing him off, right? And then he's nipping other people in the stack, and the dog it's just a neurotic dog, right? If the dude had been out there, I'm pretty sure he would absolutely got bit. The problem is he was behind a closed door, and the dog hadn't really picked up odor yet, so he was like, we're trying to call him to us and get him out there and make him a target or whatever, but the dog's like bored and frustrated, right? So he's like looking for an outlet, and that, as funny as that is in hindsight, like that could easily turn into a disaster, right? Like if that dude comes out and starts shooting, and now I'm having to deal with a dog and this guy, it could be a problem. So
yeah, for sure, if you fired, the dog would have lit you up. If he's getting frustrated and nipping at your feet and everything, you fired, somebody's getting bit after that.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, our next sponsor is really good for the business side of this. If you're in the business of breeding or raising police dogs, or even just regular dogs, pets, or gun dogs or whatever, one of the biggest hassles that we have to deal with is housing. Making sure it's safe, making sure it's high quality, all these things, make sure it's sterile, it's easy to clean, we can feed. If not, it just creates an infinitely higher workload. On top of that, it's expensive. One of our sponsors from Horizon Structures, they do a great job at making a plug and play drop ready to go as soon as it hits the deck in your location. You have a gravel pad, hook it up to electricity and water. You can put dogs in it that afternoon, and all the guesswork is taken out of it. It's ready to go as soon as it gets there, and you can go from mild to wild. I've seen some that have stainless steel on the inside. It looks like an operating room. It comes with its own air conditioner, all the way down to just like a basic one you need to put in the backyard to satisfy your policy requirements. If you're a canine handler out in the back for a 10x10, he's got an indoor outdoor, he's got a little outdoor thing that's elevated so he doesn't have to stand in any of his waste, and it's easy to clean. So everything from all the way from a single dog all the way up to, I think they do like, what do they do, Eric? Like they do like 16 and 18 like large sizes. So hit them up, horizonstructures.com, and they will get you set up quickly. So the one thing that I'm hearing, and like when I figured out that we were going to do this episode, and like when you kind of gave me a little bit of your rundown of your history, I was like, oh yeah, this will be great, because you're talking about a lot of things that we harp on continually, and you're not using the terms that we use in the training side, but you're talking about a lot of the same issues that we continually kind of like harp on through training and through handler schools and through maintenance training and through seminars and like all these other things, which is kind of one of the reasons I wanted you on here, because it's coming from somebody like outside the circle, and you're kind of like echoing some of the same sentiments. It's kind of like Eric and I call it the 50-mile rule. Like they may not listen to their like group trainers, but they're like, oh, this dude says X, Y, and Z, and the group trainers are going to be like, I've been telling you that for 10 years or however long you've been I've been telling you that for years. So in terms of types of calls where you kind of like where the rest of this part of this conversation is going is, if I routinely tell people all the time that, the same type of crime that happens in the Bay Area of California or Southern California or New York or Miami or Chicago, those types of crimes also happen in rural Kentucky, happen in Ohio, happen in Oklahoma, obviously not with the same amount of frequency, because we're not as populated and whatever. I mean, it's just like a per capita deal, but that type of crime still happens. And fundamentally, it's a resource question, right? Like how we access those people and get them under control and arrested safely so that everyone goes home safe and nobody's hurt, like really bad anyway. And so what I kind of want to talk about is if you like, I want some advice from you for handlers that may be in areas of the country, like Eric was just talking about in Wisconsin. Like there's a lot of departments. I think the average law enforcement department in the country, I think, is 18 people, was what the FBI was saying recently, 18 to 21 or something. It's very small. So Eric was just saying at the seminar in Wisconsin, he had, a bunch of dudes that were 5 and 6 man departments, but still maybe assigned to regional task force or to federal task force. So if you're listening to this and you're like, I have designs to either be part of one of these type of regional and or like federal type deals, what's the best advice you can give somebody that's from canine going to these people to advocate, hey, this is how we should be doing X, Y, and Z, what they need to do, what they need to say, what they need to show?
Yeah, so I think from a regular guy's perspective, they need to be a value asset to the team. And but what I mean by that is like they need to be tactically sound, right? So before you even implement the dog stuff, that person needs to have a good fundamentals of good law enforcement tactics and experience, because we can plan and plan and plan, but we all know that like sometimes stuff just doesn't go to plan. Like no matter how hard we try to plan and no matter how good we are, I mean, you can have this great operations plan, you can have all this stuff in there, and sometimes the suspect or some other thing will happen and it just sends everything into chaos, right? And if that handler isn't solid alone besides the dog, then that can create some problems, right? And most of your high-end teams that are doing really high-risk stuff, they don't want to add somebody in to the mix who they are unsure of. So I think for starters, right, like you got to be somebody who is reliable, right? And then on top of that, I think you need to be honest, like openly honest and transparent about the dog, because you can have a guy who is an awesome handler and the dog is a little on the sketchy side. But if that handler really knows his business, we can still utilize that dog. And maybe that ends up being a net positive on the back end when, we get that dog out in play. Maybe it's a really good dog, right? And it's really aggressive and it's very effective. But in order to do that, we may have to shift some stuff around. Like, if I'm going to put that dog in a van or something, right? Like maybe, normally I would put a cover officer right next to that handler with a normal dog. But this guy's dog is a little hot. So maybe I'll put that cover officer up front. So there's nobody around that dog. I just want options to change things around. So I think guys that are wanting to get into that work, I think you need to be a valuable asset to the team in the sense that, every sense of the word, right? You have to be a good cop first before you can add the canine handler thing in there. So you should know your case law. You should know your tactics. When guys meet you and you start integrating into the team, right? Like have some humility, have some respect, because you're trying to interject yourself into that team, right? So I think that's where I would start, right? I know it sounds like pretty remedial advice, but the reality is everything boils down to fundamentals, right?
Well, I mean, yeah,
through a house.
And many years ago on another episode, Eric said this, that most patrol canine guys are typically senior canine or senior officers on whatever shift they're working. And typically they're pretty senior within the patrol side of the shift. And the problem they have with going to the task force side or to going to integration with a team side, like a specialized team, is they're just a canine guy now. They're just the dog guy. And like, so that's where, and I knew the conversation would go this way, is that focusing on fundamentals and having fundamental control of just dog control and fundamental case law stuff. Typically on this task force shit though, like you don't necessarily need to worry about Graham as much. You need to worry about the time on bite thing. Normally most of them dudes are bought and paid for. Like we're not really assessing whether they're a flight risk or whether they're like dangerous. So
I can give you an example of why you would need to worry about Graham.
Perfect. Do that.
So I
will segue right into the next half of this. So
yeah, so I won't go into specifics just because it did end up in a lawsuit that's been adjudicated now. But basically, I'll give you a general scenario. So we're after a guy who's supposed to be armed. He had threatened the police. He said he was going to go. He said go down in a firefight. Right. So he's like, I'm not going alive. I'm going to shoot.
You're going to have to kill me to. You're going to have to kill me to arrest me.
Right. So we had been doing surveillance. We have a dog in an unmarked van. We're rolling around. We're looking for these guys, and we get information that they're at a hotel. So when we get to this hotel, we're doing surveillance, and finally we make positive ID of them in a car. Well, the team I was on, sometimes we would do not just like high risk ped stops and stuff, but we would do like vehicle jams too. So we're like, hey, if we get an opportunity to take this guy, we're going to take him before he goes into this hotel. So we end up behind the hotel, at the rear entrance, and he's with two other people. And so we're like, all right, we get out, and my position at this particular incident, I was like a cover guy, so I'm getting out with the handler out of the back of the van. So I'm like, okay, cool. So we stick our main target up. Well, now we have a third and a second and a third person there too. Well, our main target immediately surrenders. So he hits the deck. He's like, yeah, I give up, right? His female companion, she immediately surrenders. Our third guy, who is an unknown dude, is like, yeah, no, I'm not hitting the deck. So he starts backpedaling, right? Well, the handler gives him a warning. Hey, it's police, right? You're being detained, right? We're conducting an investigation. Stop, or force is going to be used against you. And the dude's like, nope. And he's backpedaling towards the door. So the handler makes the decision, right? Based on the totality of circumstances, right? We have a gun in play. We have one bad guy that we're having to deal with. This handler makes the decision to deploy the dog, and the dog absolutely bites this guy. And he ends up not being armed, but he was not compliant. And given the set of circumstances, it ended up working out okay for that handler because he was able to, it was an experienced handler, experienced dog. And so he was able to articulate like, hey, this dude is a threat to us, right? We're doing this high risk investigation on a dude who's threatening to shoot it out with the police. There's a gun in play. And we ended up finding the gun on scene. It was in the purse of the female. But that's a perfect example where, that is a basic police use of force question, right? That is something where that handler has to make the determination whether or not he has the authority to deploy a dog on a person in that environment and in that circumstance, right? And no officer on scene can make that choice for him. He's the one who has to use the force. So that's what I'm talking about is you got to be a good cop to be a good canine handler, because at the end of the day, we're using force, right? Or we're not using force. We have to make a choice.
So like Ted said, we'll segue into some case law stuff. So when did you start nerding out on case law a little bit?
For me, it was actually kind of early, but obviously I wasn't, I didn't start my company until 2020. And so for the most part, it was just for me. I just wanted to know, like, I realized early that like the policies and stuff were good to know, but they don't actually tell you what legal authority you have, right? I mean, it tells you what the department wants you to do, and sometimes they mirror some case law, but a lot of times a case will happen and then you won't hear anything from your department for a year or two, right? And this whole time you're being bound by a set of rules that you're potentially not familiar with at all. Mm-hmm. And that's where I realized like, oh, I need to start reading this stuff. So pretty early in my career, I started using this app a long time ago. It was like called US Cop. And then that kind of got me started like, oh, there's a whole library of rules that I am not aware of. So then I started, using like Westlaw. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's like a website. It's just a legal resource, right? Like, oh, I can just type in, word searches and find cases that have been adjudicated or cases that are standing. And, then the next thing is like learning how to read them, right? And learning how to read like what stuff is important and what stuff is for the legal professionals that, that doesn't pertain to me. So for me, it started pretty early, but I kept it to myself. I didn't realize that like I should be talking to other guys about this stuff. I was kind of just like, oh, like this is my job. I have to do this and be good at it. Otherwise I'm going to be in trouble. So, I just started doing it, early, but I didn't really start sharing it, until probably the last 3 or 4 years, I would say.
Yeah, Westlaw, didn't you have to pay for that? Did you have to be a member or something like that?
Yeah, it's a paid service. It's not free. I mean, there's like Justia is a good alternative that's free.
So for us,
I pay for LexisNexis and I pay for LexisNexis.
Good. So at my department, we our policy and procedures all had to get revamped. They're pretty archaic, some of them, and like you said, it just was rules that they wanted you to do a lot more administrative crap than actual doing law enforcement. And then we got Lexapol, which is out of California. And at first we were like, we don't want this California bullshit. We don't want this. This is, and we had to go through, we had a captain who was in charge of that. He did go through and take out some things that have nothing to do with us whatsoever, policies about boats and different things and just all kinds of shit like that. And then I felt that Lexapol was a little too wordy at times. There was 3 different use of force sections in there. And as a matter of fact, we had a case where one of my guys had a bite, and because the supervisors are lazy, they had me do the use of force, and I was a patrolman. I was in charge of the canine training. So they had me do the use of force review. I used the policy and Lexapol against them, and got the handler a letter of training. That was it. They were going to try to fire him. And it's because they had so many words and so many things in there that people didn't know. And I was able to use that against Supervision, who did nothing in this particular case to mitigate the possibility of him biting this person or not. Like, he actually called for Supervisor and they said no. So like, I was able to use all those words, but when we started digging through it, Lexipol is actually pretty good. It's not bad. It doesn't, like your use of force, just puts the language of Graham in there, and it might say Graham versus Connor at some point in there, but just has the prongs and the totality and all that wording in there. And the funny thing is, there's a lot of policemen around this country that use Lexipol that have no idea that that's Graham versus Connor. They don't know. They can't recite it. They don't know what it is. They've heard of it. So I think I carried like a little pocket book, with some case law stuff in it. I don't know if I ever really referred to it very much.
Don, you brought up an interesting point during that hotel thing. You're like, ultimately it's the handler's decision. He can't deploy. And, for better or for worse, if something were to go wrong, or if that deployment was in question, handler would be questioned. And then obviously, depending on when this happened and knowing that it was in the West Coast, I'd probably climb the tree anyway. But it's going to go up the tree in terms of decision-making processes and everything else. The one thing that I always find funny, and I can tell handlers and it's usually sheriff's department handlers. And what I'm about to say, Eric will grin because he knows what I'm about to say. A lot of times the sheriff's department handlers are like super, super all about policy. And they're like, if my policy says, my policy says, my policy says, my policy says, and I get it. Like, I'm great with that. And administrators, I hear that same thing. And I said, don't take this the wrong way, but generally courts don't really give a shit what your policy is, especially when it tends to be a little more restrictive than like established case law. We're not there to, judge or adjudicate policy unless you have a policy where you only pull over minorities on Tuesday after 5. Obviously they would have a problem with that. But like in general, for example, one of the policies that I think needs to go away, that's a majority of this country, is we only bite felonies. I hear that all the time. And so if I got a felony, I'm good. If I got a felony, I'm good. If I got a felony, I'm good. Right. It's like, once they hit that point, they're like, yep, we suspect that this has happened. And they're like, cool, I'm going to bite him. They don't make any determination of classification of crime or the nature of the crime, or it's literally just classification and not nature. Right. So the example I always give is Bernie Madoff, super serious felony. Right? He's in prison for so long, his parole officer hadn't even been born yet. He's going to die in prison. When the FBI arrested that dude, they put him in the back of a Suburban without handcuffs on. That's how dangerous he was. Super crazy felony. Where I'm from, catalytic converter theft, because we have a bunch of fucking tweakers here, is a felony in Oklahoma. Nobody is biting. Well, we shouldn't be biting people stealing catalytic converters. So that's the only thing they've done. Like, we're not biting them fools, right? Like, they're not hurting people and like everything else. So I tell administrators all the time, I'm like, you need to constantly weigh your policy versus what published, and not necessarily and unpublished too, stuff that a case that may not have been published, but has definitely been argued, because the arguments can be recycled. So you need to be aware of those and constantly weighing your policy versus what established case law is. And then realizing that if you specifically are making your policy so restrictive with inside of established case law that you're forcing decisions on people, that has happened. And I know that's happened in the 9th Circuit and it's happened in the 10th Circuit, where your policy is so overly restrictive, even more than case law, that it forces the decision, well, I can't do this because of policy, so now we have to double down and we have to use lethal force, or we have to do X, Y, and Z. And then it turns into a whole other shit show. And then it becomes this issue. So for handlers, it's super important to advocate for your dog and for your team. Know your case law, know your policy, say this is our gap. I just call it your policy gap. Like, this is, and not like insurance on your car, but like, this is the difference between what our policy says and what our case law says, right? And we never want it to go one direction. And then the other side of that is an administrator understanding that if you make it super restrictive, that you probably need to give them dudes some other tools or other resources to help fill in that gap. Because if not, you are asking for a Mon-El claim 100%.
So Don, let's stick with the use of force and the Graham real quick. So in Lexipol, when I was there, it said serious offense, but it doesn't say what a serious offense is. It doesn't define it because, like in Ohio, domestic violence, regular domestic violence, is a misdemeanor, but we bite those dudes all the time. Assault is a misdemeanor, but we bite assault people. So if you're consulting for somebody and their policy has serious offense or seriousness of offense or whatever, how do you define that to them? What do you talk to them about?
So I think for me, I think I would always just default back to, and for the record, I'm not an attorney, so I'm not giving legal advice, but I think for me, I would always default to what most law enforcement use of force cases boil down to is reasonableness, right? Like, if we're going to look at the totality of these circumstances and decide if a decision was reasonable, right? That's basically what it comes down to. So like your reference, right? Domestic violence, right? Okay, let's say it's misdemeanor domestic violence, right? But the guy is like as violent as can be up to the misdemeanor portion, right? And he's done it 30 times before, and he's, an uncooperative person. He hates the police. He barricades every time. And, okay, my want might be this misdemeanor crime, but it's a crime of violence. And it's also a crime connected to some of the most law enforcement deaths in the country, right? Domestic violence is a law enforcement killer when we respond to those calls, right? So I'm not saying that departments have to just say always bite those guys or whatever, right? But, but maybe open a policy for the handler, right? Because the thing about use of force is that the department isn't actually deciding who you can use force on. That's the officer. The officer has to make the decision. The department creates a policy guideline that, closely follows Graham, right? You would hope. But the reality is, as an officer, I'm the one who has to articulate the use of force, right? I'm the one who has to make the determination to use force, right? So if my policy is written in a way that it gives me some leeway, I think departments should trust that their guys are professional law enforcement officers, that they have the competency to be able to make those decisions. And, they should write their policy in a way that gives that officer a little bit of leeway, where if they get to a scene like that and this dude, has misdemeanor domestic violence and he's threatening to barricade, he's threatening all this other stuff, that the officers can go, hey, this has a potential for violence. Like, maybe I would employ a dog in this situation, so I'll bring one out. And to me, dogs, and I think a lot of people in your industry would agree with me, that a dog is a de-escalation tool. Everybody thinks de-escalation is I have to talk the guy down. The reality is we're trying to avoid killing people, right? We're trying to avoid using the maximum amount of force possible. And, I think I'd rather send a guy to the hospital some stitches versus send him to the morgue, right? I think that everybody would agree with me. So I think departments should be cognizant when they're writing their policy to give a little leeway, right? If you write something that's vague like that, serious crime or serious offense, you need to probably define that in some sort of way so that officers can do the math and decide if that the department's going to support that use of force or not. Because if guys, especially in a state like mine, if they're apprehensive about it, the default is to not use the dog.
Yeah. And the one thing that I give to handlers, so we do like this huge PowerPoint thing, which if you're watching this, I'm going to do my handler school PowerPoint that I do for all of our single and dual purpose stuff. And we're going to put it on YouTube. So you can watch it. You can see all the cases that I talk about, how we talk about it. But the one thing, so I go through all these cases and I tell handlers and we distill it down. I'm like, by and large, what we mean is crimes against people that revolve around some kind of violence against people. And then you mentioned domestic violence. The other thing that I want to add too is child pornography cases where you're doing an arrest warrant on that. While the actual possession of child pornography is not a violent crime, obviously the manufacturer is definitely, but the possession of it is like possession of data, right?
Right.
So the issue becomes though that when you go to serve those warrants, those guys know. The other thing about them, other than liking child pornography, they always like guns. So at least where we're from, like where I'm from, those dudes get shot a lot because they're like, fuck this, I'm not going to jail. You're going to have to kill me because I know what happens. And I mean, it's a thing. We have multiple federal and state level task force here where I'm at in Oklahoma that deal with that. And we arrest those dudes all the time here. But those arrests typically turn into very, very violent encounters. They have the propensity to turn into very violent encounters. And, because in its core, right, when you look at Graham, like that those crimes traditionally do not fall under that. And this is part of that whole conversation of these new host of cases coming out, revolving around how long we allow the dog to bite and all that kind of stuff, the time on bite stuff. And it's not necessarily in the same vein, but it's part of that whole conversation, because traditionally, like these white collar, and I would say child pornography is a white collar crime because it involves possession of data, right? Same thing with like wire transfers and like that kind of shit, even though it's completely morally and ethically repugnant and it's disgusting, but it revolves around possession of data. But the issue is nobody's going to get in a shootout over writing bad checks most of the time. They're just not or wire fraud transfer or fraud. But child pornography is one of those cases where those dudes know they're getting it when they get to prison. So
if you're watching this on YouTube, you see Don's wearing a hat that says Forecast Securities Group on it. Let's talk about that. Let's get into what you do there, what brought that company around, and where we're at.
Sure.
This episode is brought to you by our good friends, the Perkinsons, down at Highland Canine Training. Highland, HIGHLAND Canine Training. They're a really cool place, guys. They have a school for dog trainers, pet dogs and working dogs. That is an amazing spot, man. You can go there, and it's no joke. Like, you're not going to be there for 3 weeks and come back with some stupid certificate. This is like a 6-month school for dog trainers. You learn every aspect of it, including the business side of dog training, which can be tough, especially for us former cops or current cops or military guys that don't really know all that stuff. They've been doing it forever. They offer online courses. They sell police dogs. They have canine handler schools. They offer in-person supervisor courses. Check them out, guys. HighlandCanine.com is the website to go check it out. Everything's on that front page there. It's a very nice website. Check them out, HighlandCanine.com. For the supervisor schools, I think there's a 30% off with the discount code WDR30, HighlandCanine.com.
Yeah, so I started the company in 2020. I think a lot of people probably, COVID was a thing. I don't know what it was like for you guys, but out here, I mean, it was kind of weird. They're like, go.
We didn't participate in COVID.
Yeah, they're like, go home. And at the time I was working as an investigator, so like, go home and don't come to any offices and just work your cases. And if you have to go serve search warrants, then like go do that and then go back home. And so I was like, kind of like, okay. So I was working cases from home, which is kind of odd, right, to think about. But we were still serving search warrants and arresting people, but it was just a different pace, right?
Just make sure you wear a mask on a search warrant.
Seriously, that was like a thing for us. Yeah, it was like a pretty serious thing. So, I mean, so I started, I had a lot of free time sitting around between these cases, and I was like, maybe there's an opportunity to help some people get better. And I had some friends in the private security world that owned some pretty big private security companies, and I thought, not that these guys need like tactical training, but like maybe they just need better training for like report writing and stuff that's like really overlooked. And so, I started doing some classes with some friends of mine, and then over time, it's just evolved into, it's another law enforcement training company. I don't want to, try to say we're anything different other than the fact that for me, it's a creative outlet, and, I know I'm not going to get rich doing this stuff. I'm hoping to help people along the way. And I've noticed over my career that training has a weird term in law enforcement. Typically that means, let's look at this PowerPoint. Let's check some of these boxes. Let's make sure we're all good with post or whoever the state authority is, right? That's not really training though, right? Like that is, I guess it's a checking a box. It's a system, administrative process. It's not training. And, for me, I'm like, well, we would stop having some of these really bad videotapes and body cam videos if guys actually knew what they were allowed to do and weren't allowed to do, or if they were given some actual training that would help them perform better in the real world. So, with that kind of mission in mind, I'm trying to just keep things as simple as possible, right? Like the case law stuff, right? I make $0 off that. I try to post case law every day. It takes me about 2 to 3 hours a day to post one single case, but I have gotten a lot of feedback. Like, people really have enjoyed the distilled version of that. And the reason it works so well is because I understand, because I've been a cop and I know what I would need to know, right? I relate that to myself. Like, what information would I need to know from this case to just deploy this information on the street? So that's like the goal. And, I am working on some other stuff with some other training organizations to kind of expand that into more real training. We've done some stuff with, I'm sure you guys are familiar with Spectrum Canine. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so those guys are friends of mine. We've done some stuff together on like unmarked vehicle deployments, stuff like that. Yeah. So I have a close relationship with those guys. But that's basically, my goal really, I make enough money as a cop. I'm doing okay personally. So my goal is to help people. If I make some money along the way, that's awesome. If be better if as an industry we grow, right, and we get better, higher quality cops. I just think of it, kind of think of it as like, this job is so hard and it's really difficult sometimes to make decisions under stress. So it's like, we should all be helping each other try to become better thinkers, better comprehension of case law, right? Because that stuff is what really gives you the confidence in these critical incidents to know what decisions you can and can't make. You don't have to guess.
And the thing with canine that I think is probably relevant here is your supervisors, if you're listening to this kind of from the 30,000 foot view, your supervisors are not going to make you go to jujitsu. Like, you're going to have to do it on your own. And they are not going to give you any knowledge past what the academy does for case law. Like, I don't know. I mean, I've know some supervisors that go out of their way to help younger deputies or whoever, say whatever, and say, look, this is this case. You need to make sure you read this. Typically in canine, it goes the other direction. We'll have a supervisor that says, we can't do that. And then some handler that's well read on case law says, actually, here it is. And he's like, oh, okay. I mean, cool. Then we guess we need to update policy because that's just kind of like how they govern. And they're like, this is what policy says, is what we do. So, having access, and the joke that I tell, and it's not a joke, is the only reason dogs exist is to mess with the Fourth Amendment. I mean, either through bad searches or bad seizures or good ones, hopefully. And so knowing, and that's why I think canine handlers in general need to be like Fourth Amendment ninjas. There's other shit that they need to worry about too. But in terms of, like when Trump was in office the first time, his assistant attorney general, blah, 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 had some deal in front of the Senate. And he was like, canine handlers are disproportionately put in the highest instance of use of force of any specialized unit in law enforcement. And typically when we have those dogs out, like, it's because we have a reason to prolong that stop for narcotics. And we suspect that there's narcotics crime happening, or somebody does. And you hope that that's valid. And two, that there is a disproportionately high probability that you're going to have to use quite a bit of force to get this person under control. And it requires a lot of training, it requires a lot of supervision, it requires a lot of oversight, it requires a lot of things. But the alternative is, you, like Don, like you said, we're trying not to shoot this dude. So, and we're trying to make it as minimally invasive as possible when we conduct searches. So, and ultimately that's not necessarily a lot of a handler skill. I mean, there's a lot of handler skill that goes involved, not a lot of training. There's also a lot of reading, and your administrators are not going to give you cases. I think there probably some are. Don, I'm sure when you work for Highway Patrol that they probably sent down a lot of stuff. I know our guys do. But I know smaller agencies, like Eric says all the time, most administrators can't even tell you what gram is if they have it and set it in front of you. So it's going to be your responsibility. So, which is why coming full circle, which is why we had you on the show, because you distill it down in a couple of slides. And I'm like, this is a really good way to explain this.
This episode is brought to you by DOGTRA, DOGTRA official, DOGTRA.com. You guys have heard us talk about it. We've been with DOGTRA for a long time. We love them. They're amazing people. We love their product. There's so many different things that they do. The 1900S, the hands-free. They got all kinds of things, poppers, droppers, all kinds of different things with their e-collar. But I have been a proponent of their YS600 bark collars for a long time. Everybody knows I talk about it. When I had the kennel open, I would come in and show videos of all the dogs being quiet. The YS600, they have the YS300 for smaller dogs. But here's the thing, guys. They just came out with a bark collar called the Smart Bark Collar. Dude, this thing is amazing. It attaches to an app on your phone. You can control everything out of it, see in real time what's working, what isn't working with the dog. But here's the kicker. It catches whining. That's the big deal with that Smart Bark Collar. It catches the whining, because we all know your dogs learn to whine underneath the threshold of other bark collars, and it's super annoying. But with that Smart Bark Collar, it catches the whining. And in the app, while it's working, you can just reach up and hit the vibrate button. There's a little button on your thing that'll vibrate that if that seems to work a little bit better for your dog. Or you can actually administer your own stim as a little bit extra if need be. You can set minimums, maximums, sensitivity levels to pick up that whining. Check out DOGTRA.com. They have a discount code WDR10, 10% off a single item over $200. But check out that Smart Bark Collar, guys. It is amazing. We've been messing with it in my facility, and my employees absolutely love it. Check them out, dogtra.com. So like Forecast Securities Group, what do you offer a department? So say like a 25-man department calls you. Do you have like a set of classes that you're good at, or can you, like what's your go-to right now?
Yeah, so I'm capable of teaching most things. My go-to is the basics. I think we overlook a lot of the basics. Well, obviously everybody loves like a high speed, cool tactical class, right? I think, myself included. But the problem is that, no offense to them, but we have a lot of cops who are not good report writers, right? And the problem is everything that you do ends up being a report writing issue for the most part, right? I mean, if you use force, that ends up being a report writing issue. You're going to have to be able to articulate that. If you search somebody's house, you're going to have to be able to articulate that. If you search a car, you're going to have to be able to do that. And so I've done report writing quite a bit. Currently, I do have some classes that I'm working on for post. One of those is a canine deployment class in conjunction with some other training companies, just because that's a resource-heavy class. But yeah, I'm open to, if a department needs something specifically, it's usually the way my business is structured, it's me and then I 1099 people. So if somebody wants something specifically, I've been in law enforcement a long time. I know a lot of really, really, really solid cops who are instructors, and they have their own specialties and their own thing. I think the worst thing that we can do is pretend to be specialists in everything. That is not me, right? Like, I'm a relatively competent shooter and tactician just based on my work experience. I am surface level with canines because I've had some exposure and I've done some teaching. But, when it comes to certain topics, I probably wouldn't be the go-to guy, right? So I would find somebody who is, and I would employ them via a 1099 contractor to bring their expertise into an agency. That's basically the idea,
In conjunction with your report writing, have you done any courtroom testimony classes? Because guys are horrible at courtroom. Horrible.
I haven't, but to be honest with you, I think that's a really good idea. I've been fortunate. Most people don't realize it, but the Highway Patrol actually has a policy that if you're writing tickets, that you shall attend court. And so early in my career, even though those cases are, let's be honest, sometimes kind of lame, right? Speeding tickets or whatever. The reality is, right, you're getting the kinks worked out by having to testify thousands and thousands of times on some of the dumbest, window tint or whatever. They don't, at the time, they don't mean anything. But what it does is it builds a good foundation for how to perform in court. And then when you start working serious cases and you get these murders and, major felony cases, some of that fundamental experience from traffic court actually translates over quite well because you get comfortable talking in court. You can understand the procedure. You can understand what happens in, a cross-examination. So, yeah, I mean, that would definitely be something, I think would be a valuable service. It's not something I currently do, but not because it's just hasn't
been asked. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was always really took pride in my courtroom testimony, to the point where, you get nervous. I get it. You're going up on a big case or whatever. The specific defense attorney and how he comes after guys or doesn't come after, what he does. But if you go there enough and you're doing enough, when to pause, because there's going to be an objection. That's coming. You can tell the questions the way they're going. But I tell guys, listen, man, you got to get good enough in court so that when or if you get sued, and because you will testify in your own federal hearing, your federal court, you will testify in everything leading up to it. You will testify once, maybe twice in the trial. And especially if they have taken your qualified immunity, your ass better be good at courtroom testimony. You better be good, because they will make you look like you're lying or you're making shit up or you're just a buffoon, because that's what they do. There's no criminal standard in federal court when you're getting sued. They just do what they can to make you look like a bumbling moron if you're bad on the stand.
Yeah, well, even the deposition, right? Like, people don't realize, like, in a deposition, there's no objection. Your attorney can object, but the questioning continues.
Oh, they're going to get you.
Yeah.
That's all coming out.
In my experience with depositions, it has been, the times that I have a friend here locally that does this, that helps. He actually is a federal defense attorney, but he's also helps officers get prepared for this kind of stuff. So it is like both sides. And it's interesting to watch, because on the side from you're being sued and it's a qualified immunity hearing, there's the deposition side and the interrogatories. And I tell guys, I'm like, even from the interrogatory, before you even sit down and fucking put your hand in the air, like, start thinking about how you're going to say this and then stick with that. And it needs to look the same and sound the same all the way up. And because from my end, during depositions and during interrogatories, I've answered questions like is super vague. And they're like, well, can you give it any more? I'm like, oh, I'm glad you asked. And then it becomes this entire thing. And like Eric said, knowing where they're going to object, knowing when they're not going to object. And I've had dudes flat out tell me during depositions, they're like, we're not going to let you say that. I'm like, well, it's true. They're like, we're still not going to let you say it. I'm like, well, I don't know what to tell you. Like, if I get a chance, I'll say it. And now I've said it and it's on record and it's part of the deposition. And I guarantee you the defense is probably going to be like, hey, during the deposition, didn't you say this during cross-examination? Because I know how the process works. And they're like, we're still going to object to it. I'm like, you can object to it all you want, but I still said it. So it becomes this like thing. And a lot of guys are like, oh, it's just trial. It's not. Like, they know exactly what you're going to say when you sit up there in front of those people. Before they've already asked you the questions in writing and multiple times in verbal. They've asked you the question. So if you deviate from that.
Deposition was a year before trial. So.
And if you deviate from your deposition answer, holy shit. Are you lying or are you stupid? Is what they're going to ask you. And they're like, I'm both. I'm both. I'm lying and I'm retarded. Sorry. I got so.
You put out a lot of free stuff, right? Case law every day and things like that. And like Ted was saying, how he saw you. Where do you put that up? How can people find that stuff?
Yeah. So the case law is on Instagram and TikTok. For like consulting services, we do have a website. That's forecast-securities.com. I think you guys have that as well. And our Instagram is forecast_securities group. So forecast securities group. And then, same thing on TikTok. So, I usually will post, I try to post a case law around every day. I do miss occasionally because, I got stuff going on or whatever, but, yeah, I mean, the idea is to create, and sometimes I'll deviate from case law to post things like human behavior or like just tips, right? Like we're talking about with the testimony, right? I think you guys will agree. The number one thing that gets us in trouble on the street, in testimony, in court, just in general, is when we lack the emotional intelligence to maintain control, right? Even something as simple as a crazy hot scenario on the street, right? I always try to remind myself, if I sound calm and I seem like I'm composed, even when everything's going wrong, that's going to obviously look and sound a lot better than if I'm yelling and screaming and I got all this chaos going on, right? the same thing is true in a courtroom when you're testifying. I think if you can maintain some emotional control, and when they're trying to jab it to you and get you to get pissed off, and if you can just be calm, be factual, and maintain that emotional control, that helps. And I think so. Sometimes I'll post stuff like that too, just patrol reminders, that kind of thing. But yeah, I try to post something police officer related, and it's not just like cool tactical stuff. It's like stuff that if somebody just sees it, hopefully sometime they remember it. You know what I mean? Hopefully it just is back there in their brain somewhere.
Yeah, and if you break it down kind of like plain language where guys can understand, that's kind of one of the reasons why guys don't study case law a lot. It's confusing. It can be very
legalese is a
you need the Cliff Notes version, really. You break it down. But I always say this every time we talk to case law guys or the lawyers or whatever, dudes. If you can do all your research, know all your court cases in and out, talk the defense attorney into circles, don't cite the case on the stand.
Unless you are 1,000% sure, because they will 1,000% take a recess and they're like, what? Hold on a second. Go look at that real quick. Because no judge wants to allow a decision to go through that knowingly violates case law or established.
Well, they'll talk you into a circle. You
that too. Yeah. I mean, there's that too. So yeah,
tons and tons and tons of time at law school training cross-examination.
Yeah. Yeah. An example, I'll give you a real world example that's police world adjacent. So when it comes to use of force, everybody likes to cite John Battle, which is a Supreme Court case from like 1900 about being able to use force to resist an arrest, right? That case actually has never been overturned. However, in the last 120 years, there has been multiple cases from basically every court in America, including the Supreme Court, that abandon that thinking, and they basically identify your recourse as a citizen for like what you determine to be excessive use of force or an unlawful arrest or whatever. Your recourse is court, right? You sue that person in court under a claim, and you recoup damages via monetary or a punishment. So that case, people cite all the time on the internet. I'm sure everyone sees it and they hear it. Right?
It's a favorite of sovereign citizens. They love that one.
Yeah. So that case, you can cite it all you want, but if you were to bring that case up in a modern court, they would cite 150 cases that are completely counter that. Even though that case has never been cited as an overturned case, the practices in that case have been basically whittled down to nothing because there have been multiple cases that build a foundation that's counter to that case. So that's a good example is, unless you have a real good comprehension for the law, right? You're an attorney. Basically, I wouldn't go being an attorney, you know what I mean? Or pretending to be
right,
one.
Yeah. Yeah, you'll get spun up pretty quickly. And judges don't like it. They don't like it. They're like
the other one
in their job. I objected one time on the stand, just out of habit. I had done these prelims so many times, and well, what I did was I paused. I looked at the prosecutor. You're going to object, and the judge just lost it on me. And judge and I had a very good relationship. Him and I went and had coffee and discussed don't do that shit in my court type deal. But he said the prosecutor was daydreaming and missed it. So
one of the cases that gets brought up a lot in that same type of thing is Anchondo. Like I realize it's a published case and it's a 10th Circuit case, which is where I'm at. But I'm like, I tell people all the time, I was like, it's good to know this one for sure. Who'd we have on Ted? We had the other Ted Dowson, and he's like, he literally said, I'm so fucking tired of hearing about that case. He's like, it's not a good idea. I know it's published. We get it. But even the 10th Circuit is kind of like, we just kind of waffle around. We're like, well, yeah, but, and like, don't do that. And don't die, because the circumstances of that were so isolated, and it was such a unique series of events that had to do with Border Patrol and some other shit. And it's just one of those cases that's like, yeah, everybody, they was fine and we got an affirmative out of it, but don't do it.
Yeah, but along that same line, there's cases where you'll get an affirmative ruling, but it doesn't necessarily set a precedent, right? They're saying in this set of circumstances, yeah, like this is okay in this, because when they're making these rulings, unless they create a standard, the court is basically saying, well, in this case, right, in these circumstances, this is acceptable for this. That doesn't necessarily mean, that doesn't necessarily mean, okay, now we can go out and, do this on every single traffic stop. I mean, just a lot of this stuff comes down to reasonableness, right? Like you got to be reasonable. And that's why we really need to help each other be more intelligent, to be completely honest. Like we got to help each other be a little bit more professional when it comes to this stuff, so we can think reasonably and not get tied up in the emotion or the game or whatever it is.
Yeah. And before we sign off, because we've said reasonableness a couple times,
that's the name of this episode.
I know supervisors that are watching this here. Whose reasonableness standard is it?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So basically it's going to be it's an objective reasonableness standard based on the perception of another similar officer in a similar set of circumstances. It's not going to be your supervisor or a cop that worked in 1993, right? It would be one of that person's peers with similar experience.
Somebody that's been with us since the beginning is Arno at ALM, based out in Vegas. Arno makes fantastic bite suits. I've been a senior level PSA decoy for a long time. All of my trial suits are ALMs. I love them. I've sent my one jacket back multiple times to have new sleeves put on it because it fits so well. Arno works with you through the process, helps you get a design set up. In fact, when I went out to see him in Vegas, he had my original design still in my original pattern still in the workshop there, and he was able to make me another jacket just out of the one that I have that's like 10 years old. He made me another one. Super high quality materials, super high quality stitching. Great service after the fact if you have to have repair work done. Hit him up, ALM K9 Equipment. That's the letter K number 9.com. ALM K9 Equipment. Use this discount code WD Radio for 10% off. Another person that has been with us since the beginning is the person that wrote the music for the intro and the outro on this. His name's Brother Dege. He's no longer with us. He's a super talented musician, and I actually met him at a live show here in Tulsa. Super nice guy. He was super supportive of what we do here and what police dogs do in general. And he was gracious enough to allow us to use the music for that. Yeah. Wherever you're at, you can look at him on iTunes and on Spotify. Just Brother Dege, spelled Dege, and it's brotherdege.net.
Yeah. Not your opinion, not your grudge you don't like because that guy always does this stuff, that kind of crap.
Or the fact you don't like dogs. Standard. That happens too. That happens also. So, yeah. This has been good, man. And this episode is going to be called Reasonable from 30,000 feet. So reasonable you can see it from space. How about that? So, because I mean, we kind of covered, we didn't do like a ton of case law stuff, but I mean, I think you gave us some very good outside looking in information, which is what I wanted from this anyway. So you're at forecast_securities_group.
That's Instagram.
Yeah, the Instagram, and then forecast-securities.com on the interwebs. Where are you?
Van Ness Canine, Rootside Canine, Ohio. On Amazon, Eric Stanbro, my book. I wrote it just like he's writing his case law. I wrote it so that the regular canine guys can read my book and go, oh, shit, I know exactly what he's saying. He didn't get too sciencey. So, yeah, what about you?
Ted_Summers on Instagram, and then Torchlight Canine, letter K number 9, HRD Police Canine. We got several of those seminars spun up for late 2026 after I get back from Europe, late 2025 and 2026. And then I didn't talk about it all this time, but Oil Capital Canine Fund for our 501 for Oklahoma teams. We're going to be doing some seminars in 2026. I think I've got 4 on the books, and Eric, I think you're one of those. I just got to sit down and figure out a time when we can have you come down. Those will be free. If you're listening to this and you're in Oklahoma or in the neighboring area, seminars are free. You just show up, and I write the hours for them. But outside of that, yeah, Torchlight Pets too. If you want to just look at dogs that my canine trainer or my pet trainers are training, it's all cute. Fucking doodles. Although I say we have like 4 Dobermans right now, so.
We have 2,
yeah. This is Adobe season, apparently.
Yeah.
So Don, man, this was good. It was a good conversation, and it was kind of refreshing to have somebody from outside of our little bubble. So for sure.
Yeah, I want to extend a thank you to you guys. I appreciate having the opportunity to sit and talk with you guys, and enjoyed myself.
Yeah, cool. We appreciate it.
All right, guys. On the next one, we'll see you.
Thanks.